joined by Ron Citron of the Citron team. Ron, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So you are one of the top realtors in this area, and I would love, and I really, first of all, I appreciate you taking the time to give us your insight. This is definitely one of those unique moments in history, right? The last 24 months, 12, 24 months. And so I want to really learn a little bit about you. Who is Ron Citron? How long you've been in it? And give us a little insight here.
Sure. Just the personal background. So, well, like you, Steve, I started off as a CPA many, many years ago. But unlike you, I just decided I didn't want anything to do with accounting anymore. And so I went into the real estate profession. I know you stayed true to your education. So about 20 years ago, I started with Long and Foster. I've been with them ever since. And I work in the DC, close in Montgomery County suburbs and Northern Virginia suburbs. That's the area where I specialize. And basically helping people buy and sell homes. That's what I do. And I do it, what makes the Ron Citron team different is we do it as a team approach, meaning that we have different people on the team that specialize in different areas of the process. So to make sure that people get what we call a total support system or total support solution. So they get experts in every area along the way so that the whole home buying or home selling journey goes really well.
Well, I think one of the unique things that you just said about was, your background and experience also as a CPA allows you to understand the financial aspects of buying a home and selling a home as well, which is so unique. A lot of home buyers, or home agents, selling agents or buying agents are really focused on the selling and buying of a home and the client side, right? You're able to really introduce the financial side and walk them through what needs to be done and the advantages and disadvantages. So, I look at coming from the CPA world as a huge advantage to have that knowledge.
Yeah, and what I found is, buying a house is a very emotional. There's a tremendous amount of emotions, whether you're buying or selling. We know that, right? And there's a tremendous amount of what are the numbers at the end of the day? From a buyer's perspective, what's my payment? What's my cash to close? From a seller's perspective, what money should I spend up front to make this house better? What's the return on that investment? What is it going to be? And at the end of the day, how much am I going to net? And we found that people really are appreciative when you can sort of lay out those numbers for them in a really simple to follow, easy to understand way.
And what did it say? It's the first or second largest purchase, right, you make in your life, right?
I think it's the largest, yeah. And for many people, it also tends to be the largest purchase and also the most expensive thing they sell. And we find that for many, many Americans, it is probably their greatest source of wealth at retirement. Not all, but for many, it's their greatest source of savings.
And it's multiple times as well, whether it's upsizing or downsizing. It's not like you buy a home once and then that's it. These days, there's been a trend where people are really switching homes every so often, right? So
right. Yeah. That's very market dependent, right? But when you think about our area, DC, you may start off living in the city with a condominium, and then maybe you go to a townhouse, and then you go to a single family home. Some people go to that, that larger, close to $2 million home, and then downsize to the, to that more urban location is a downsizing part of, it's a whole cycle that people go through. So you're right. We've had clients that go through, 3 or 4 or 5 transactions over the course of their life.
And to add on top of that, right, with a remote environment, can you really have enough space if you're all in the same home?
So if we talk about trends that I see happening for 2021, this is the big one is space. Look, people always understood that they wanted there was a lot of reasons people bought houses historically, right? And they looked at them and they always thought the kitchens and the master bedroom, bathroom areas, those are sort of in the family room areas. Those are the big, hot button areas. But what's interesting is as we, for 2020 and as we enter 2021, it's things like second office, home gym. Those are becoming the big hot button items that people just need. And we're seeing that, across the board. And that's what's changing the dynamics of what people want to buy. And you're seeing a certain number of people moving from the city to the suburbs because they just want more space and they figure they're going to be working from home more. So that ability to shorten their commute doesn't mean so much anymore.
So, that being said, I think you can confirm it's really been a seller's market, right? At least as of late.
So if we look at what happened for 2020, is you had two demographics doing exactly the opposite things at the same moment in time. You have the baby boomer demographic, which they're sitting on all the houses, all the supply of houses right now. And the baby boomers, for the most part, said, you know what? I'm just better off staying where I am. And I think whatever plans I had for downsizing or moving, let's just put that on hold right now. And that created this big, it's just the inventory just, went with that, right? So the inventory dropped by over 30% this year, the supply of houses. Then let's look at the other demographic. The millennials are those people getting ready to buy. They said, oh my God, I'm living in the city, I'm renting. And with COVID and everything, the city isn't really the place for me anymore. And look at this, interest rates just dropped below 3%. So that demographic, at the same moment in time when the baby boomers are saying, I don't think I want to sell, the millennial demographic says, you know what, I think what better time to buy than right now. Now, for many of them, it sped up their search. And they said, instead of waiting till next year to do this, that fear of missing out set in, and let's do it this year and take advantage of low interest rates. So at the exact moment in time, you have the people who are selling sort of sitting on the sidelines, and all the people that were thinking about buying, whether it was this year or even perhaps next year, moving up their search. And what they found is there was no supply to meet the demand. And so as a result of that, we had, for the most part, most of the neighborhoods in our DC metro area had double-digit appreciation, or probably around 10%. That's really not a sustainable amount of appreciation, but you can see why it happened, because there's just so many people looking to buy that every time a new listing came on, I won't say every time, but many times, it would get more than one offer, it would bid up. And as a result of that, these bidding wars, we saw the price appreciation. And this always leads to affordability when you think about it, right? I mean, how is somebody able to afford these rising prices? And what happened along the way is the interest rates went from slightly above 3% to below 3%. So even though the prices were going up, the cost of money was coming down. And so it was making it so that people could still afford it, even in this appreciating market. That's a lot to say, I know.
Well, but it's valuable information though. And so, I mean, being a buyer, right, in this environment is not easy. But on the flip side, neither is being a seller as well. I mean, being a seller in this environment, making sure you're not overvaluing your property as well, or being attached to it emotionally, that makes it impossible to sell, because, you hope that, rationale will take over at some point, and people will not significantly overpay. I mean, they'll overpay to get into a place that they love, but they're not going to go so far above that it becomes unreasonable. And so I think that really segues nicely into what we want to talk about, really, which is the 5 P's of home selling, right? The 5 things that every home seller should know. Would love for you to enlighten us on that.
Yeah, so this is something I find, having done this for 20 years, that many of the sellers have the same questions, the same, like, how do I do this? And there's 5 things that all sellers should know, and coincidentally, they all start with the letter P. And it's the preparation, the photography, the pricing, the promotion, and the professionalism. And if you do these 5 Ps right, then I think it was the magical 6 P, your proceeds, will turn out to be where you had hoped and expected them to be. And I've done something new. And created basically a video ebook where it's a series of videos and explainers that basically explain all the 5 Ps. But if you like, we could go through these, one by one, just to give people a sense of what that's about.
Absolutely. I'm definitely going to include the link as well on our YouTube video. But if you could give us the P's, the P's and a little summary about each one, so that our viewers have a little taste, so that they'll go in and check out your ebook. That'd be great.
Sure. So the first P is preparation, right? And so the mantras for preparation is light, bright, neutral, clutter-free, and clean. You really want to get a house in that, at those basic levels. But when we're talking about preparation, if you think about it, the home's either going to be occupied or vacant, and it's either going to show great or it's going to need some attention. And so it kind of creates these 4 quadrants, if you will. In the video book, these 4 quadrants are really mapped out. And so what we find, if you have a house that already shows really well and it's vacant, that's the best place to be in. And it's maybe just a little bit of touch up, a little bit of some staging. And a house like that, we find is sort of, especially in a COVID environment, it's one of the best homes to sell, because 1, it shows great, people can buy it, move right in. And 3, and the third thing is, from the seller's perspective, they don't have to be in the house when people are showing it, and that's going to make their life substantially less complicated.
And do you feel that staging help sell that home, as opposed to just completely empty?
Yes, and so it does for a couple of reasons. First off, buying a house, no matter how we look at it, is an emotional decision. You walk in, you sort of cross that threshold of the foyer, the front door, and you just start to feel something. And when you start seeing homes that are furnished and they're staged, and if it's simple, it doesn't have to be extravagant, just simple staging, it just creates a nice feeling versus looking at basically walls and floors. Because a house, when you really think about it, it's just a whole bunch of squares with walls and floors, and it can be quite boring. So it's the way that we accessorize it with the furniture that really gives it some of its life and its energy. So it does make a difference. I work with a lot of builders and renovators, and each one of them are in the business of buying and fixing up and selling houses for the purpose of making a profit. And across the board, every single one of them invests in staging. And it does to make a difference, especially when you look at it from the second P, which is photography, right? So you have to get the house prepped and ready to go. But once it's prepped and ready to go, it's not until then that we bring the photographer in. So that second P of photography, if you're trying to take pictures of drywall and floors, it's just not going to come out very enticing from a buyer's perspective. But once it's furnished and everything, that photography is going to come out so much better. And so that's why these P's, the way we order them, they're actually in an order for a reason. Is first get it prepped and ready, then get the photography done, and you're going to find that then you're going to have the right digital pieces in place to start doing the promotion, which is the third P, promotion. And because ultimately, everywhere that this home is seen online, you really want it to look good, because the purpose of all the promoting we're doing is ultimately to get that buyer that's looking at a house online to say, wow, this looks really good to me. I think, I want to get out of my chair, call my agent, go see this property, and hopefully if I like it, I'll make an offer on it. And that's the purpose of the promotion when you think about it.
But also when talking about promotion, right? I mean, you are someone that has tremendous amount of experience and contacts in the industry. So promotion is not just putting something on an MLS listing, right? It's about, advertising and marketing, reaching out to, your relationships in the industry to see if there's a buyer agent, right, that's looking for those things.
We do a lot of that. Yes. I mean, all of that counts, because you never know you never know where the buyer's going to come from. So you really want to explore every possible avenue that you can to make sure that wherever they're looking, you want them to be able to find you. And then you also want to reach out to the people that could possibly be looking, and so that that they're aware that you exist. And when you think about it, so we prepared a house, we got the photography of the house, we've been promoting the house. So what's the fourth P? And that's going to be pricing, right? So if you do all of the first three P's right, but you get that fourth P, pricing, wrong, and the margin of error there is actually quite slim. If you're as much as I would say 3% overpriced, it's really going to make it difficult for a home to sell. But if you price it right, we find that the home should sell typically, I like to say, within 20 showings or 20 days. That's, if you haven't sold in 20 showings or 20 days, and you're under $1 million, I'm going to use that qualifier there, then typically there's, something seems a little bit off, because the market here is moving fast enough that typically you'll sell that quickly. And we find if it's priced a little bit lower or less than anticipated, many of the markets here in our DC area will have, when I look historically at the data, you can see neighborhoods where the 40% of the homes sell above list price. And from a seller's perspective, I think that's a really healthy thing to know, because a seller's always worried about, am I going to underprice my home? Well, if you know that 40% of the homes in the neighborhood where you're selling are selling above list price, that gives you confidence to know that if you've underpriced it, that the market should help autocorrect for you, and that multiple offers should come in and it should bid up to its highest possible value.
Mm-hmm. And so that's important to note. I mean, being able to price right is probably, well, at least from an accountant's perspective, right, is one of the most important. But also, how do you deal with clients who in their head have overpriced their property in their head?
It's hard. So I take, first off, the first thing we do with pricing is we want to look at, what is the market doing right now? So let's say we have a house that's about $1 million house, right? So when I look at everything, all the sales for this, in this, homes maybe 100,000 more, 100,000 less than $1 million, in the county that they're in that are similar, and say, what is the market for this price range doing right now? The next thing I want to do is shrink it down. Okay, so if we did it, let's say, I'm going to be hypothetical for Montgomery County, let's do it for just everything in Bethesda specifically. And let's see how the market's doing right now just for Bethesda. Then let's shrunk it down one more time just to, let's say, one school district, let's say the Whitman School District. And then let's bring the sample size down one more time to just this immediate neighborhood. And what I'm looking for in all four of these sample sizes is a ratio. And the ratio is the number of homes under contract over the number of homes under contract plus the number of homes currently for sale. And whenever that ratio is 40% or above, that's going to be a really good sign for a seller. And whenever that ratio is 40% or below, that's sort of the trending indicator that says this is getting better and better for a buyer. We're also going to look at the days on market for these four market segments. If it's the days to sell is 30 days or less, that's really great from a seller. If it's 60 days or more, that means it's getting really good for a buyer. So before we even begin pricing the seller's home, to answer your question, we want to give them a sense of which way is this market moving, and is the market where your house is moving in conjunction with the larger markets in the school district, in the town, or in the county, or we're moving faster than it or slower than it, just to give them perspective. Then from there, it's a silly name, but it seems to work. I think of it as the more than less than game, where we take a number of the comparables in your immediate neighborhood and we lay them out from the lowest price to the highest price, and then we have to look at them with a certain amount of detail, like look at how this kitchen look at the size of the lot, look at the interior square footage, look at the renovated bathrooms. Do we think a buyer, not what you think, but do we think a buyer would be more interested in buying, for the amount that this sold for, would they be more interested in buying your house at this price or this house at this price? And what we find is there's going to be a whole bunch where it's like, oh, we think the buyer would probably choose our house. But on the other end, there's, some of these homes are going to be bigger, nicer, and have more amenities. So we're going to be less than these, more than these. And you find this little space in the middle. And that space in the middle is where we really want to help the seller sort of align themselves. And if they get that right, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, so there's an intangible, right, and a tangible process, right? And the tangible process for you really comes from being a CPA and being able to put ratios and numbers to this house and the competitors, right, in the area.
Right.
And the intangible really is the look and feel and how the home is staged and how you feel when you walk in it compared to the home, the newness of the home, right?
Yeah. And you find what happens as you're doing the more than less than game is you get a couple of them where it's like you can't really tell, like, am I more than this or less than this? And that's actually when you're saying, okay, maybe intuitively this is the number that we should be somewhere near that number. Because the interesting thing about the DC region is it's not like it's, if you're pricing a whole bunch of townhouses that are all in a row, they're all built in the same year, they all look exactly the same, it's kind of easy to price that. But the reality is our single family market is nothing like that. You have one house that's been torn down, you have another house that has an addition, you have another house that's in original condition, you have another house that maybe was not expanded, but the bathrooms and the kitchen were updated. And so you're trying to figure out how do you combine these different apples and oranges somehow to figure out what's the value of the one that you're trying to price right now. It can be a little tricky.
And so I think at the end of the day, what really the bottom line is that there's nothing more important than using an experienced, knowledgeable, financial savvy. I can add that because
yes.
I like that realm of it.
Well, can I cut you off and say that is actually the fifth P is professionalism? So you nailed it. So, I mean, and the reason, the purpose of this this video book that we created for people to watch, it doesn't matter whether they're choosing to hire me or hire or interview another agent that they're already predisposed to use, or in this video book is designed so it could be, someone can watch it and be anywhere in the country. It's still going to be really helpful, but it's understanding what are these 5 Ps and how do they affect them. But even more specifically with respect to professionalism, when you hire an agent, they have certain, what I'll call almost legal obligations to you. Confidentiality, obedience, due diligence, disclosure, loyalty, certain things that they need to do so that you should always feel as the seller that's hiring them, that they've always put your best interest at heart, because that's the most important thing. And if they just do that, I would say they've satisfied the basic criteria of what you expect out of an agent. But I do think, and this is what you were saying, is that there's this whole nother level above it where if they can bring to it experience, judgment and expertise. Then you take that sort of level of professionalism and you amp it up. And as a seller, you're going to get that much better result. And then you can even, I think a professional can amp it up one more level by just being, by showing empathy, by really listening, by really caring and making sure that the seller knows they're being heard, they're being listened to, and that what is important to them is important to their agent as well. And if those three things are all in alignment from a seller's perspective, I think you're going to have a much better outcome at the end of the day. And for many sellers, they measure outcomes in proceeds. And that is the 6P.
Well, you mentioned right there at the end, it's the perfect segue to be able for people to contact you, right? There is basic and then there's extraordinary. And why work with basic when you can have extraordinary, right? And that's you, Ron. And I appreciate you sharing your information. It shows your expertise. I absolutely want to make sure that folks check out the link, right, to the ebook, and that they contact you at the Ron Citron team at Long & Foster. And if anybody wants to get a hold of you, I know they can call you at 202-364-1300. So I really appreciate you taking the time today to give us your insight and your knowledge, and hope that you have a great rest of the week.
Thanks so much, Steve. If you don't mind, can I just give a better number? And that
Absolutely.
Sure. And that'd be better to call me on the cell directly. And that's 202-321-4677. And thank you.
Absolutely.
I appreciate the opportunity to be here. It means a lot to me.
Listen, the more contact information people have, the better it is. So just the fact that you're able to give them your cell phone number shows right there. That's extraordinary. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.